ready to kick off?
Sure.
Cool. Risto Miikkulainen, great to have you with us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Welcome to The Rock.
Thank you.
So, you enjoying it so far?
Absolutely. Never been here before, and it's very impressive.
Well, yeah, I mean, The Rock itself is incredible. It really is. And it's, the tunnels inside. I mean, you'll have a chance to see it. And the monkeys, by the way. The monkeys are a lot bigger than people would expect.
Yeah, and supposedly also Neanderthals were here a while back, but we missed them.
It's, well, do you know what? You'll see today, actually, like inside, like the history of here. And it's very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. I sometimes, when I look at the Rock, I think, what's it doing here?
Mm.
Has an asteroid at some point hit the Earth or something millions of years ago, and it's just formed? Because it almost feels a little bit out of place, you know?
Yeah, there are probably conspiracy theories about aliens using it as a base camp or something.
Well, actually, we can jump onto that, actually. But I've got to ask you one thing, starting with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Nobody likes the "I told you so" guy. You know, and with Rayon now, like from where we were 8 years ago to where we are now, it feels like we got a hell of a lot of things right that people missed. And we're proud of it, to be fair. However, for you, you know, you were talking about these things like 10, 20, 25 years ago. And now all of a sudden, everything that you were educating the world on back then is now coming to fruition. So, yeah, how does it feel for you seeing this transformation?
Yeah, it feels wonderful. It was long before that. It was in the 80s when we had excitement about neural networks, and I was a student, and that was actually global excitement. And then, of course, there was the winter for neural networks in the late 90s, early 2000s, and so on. So at that point, I even considered renaming my research group from Neural Networks Research Group to something else, machine learning, because it was such a bad name. But no, I'm like a kid in a candy store. It's so wonderful to be here and have all this excitement. But it's funny that it never occurred to me to tell anybody I told you so, because it's turned that those people who weren't believers back then, who were saying that neural networks will never amount to anything, they now convinced that it is actually real, and they are friends. You know, everybody's working on that direction. So it's more like finally we have convinced the world that this works, and everybody's on the same boat. And I think it's really, really, really great.
So back in the 80s, what were you seeing that everyone else was missing?
Well, it's also, that's another lesson that I want to dispel, that nobody had an idea that it was going to turn out this way. I mean, it's a big surprise. We were working in the 80s and 90s. We were working on exactly the kind of problems that LLMs solve. We were trying to get neural networks to understand language and be flexible with language. And for instance, we were trying to get them to understand what it means for a dog to be driving a car when you'd never seen anything like that happen. People drive cars. Dogs do other things. And we could never get variable binding even to work. And we worked on it for a long time in the 80s and 90s, and many people did. And now it works. And this is just amazing. And it turned out that the ideas were not wrong. We had the right ideas. A lot of them were correct. We didn't have the scale. We did not have the training data. We did not have the compute to learn from it. Million times more compute than we had in the 90s actually made a difference. Deep learning came out. And then another 40,000 times or so gave us LLMs. And if anybody says that they saw it coming, they are lying. I mean, it was a big surprise and that it happened. So there was nothing wrong with the ideas. It was the scale and then the confluence of a couple of things. And now there are new ideas also. So many people are working on it. So we are making progress that we didn't really foresee, and are new ideas. And that's just a great position to be in.
And why does it work so well now? Like, do we understand like what the magic is that is happening?
I don't think we understand it very well. And this is really great. I mean, because it gives us, as scientists, it gives us a challenge. To now go, scaling happened, and all of a sudden dogs drive cars, no problem. How does the LLM with that scale actually separate these roles from the content, which we couldn't do before? And it has to do with scale, obviously, but is there something internally that allows them to detach from the tokens and build high-level representations? Well, attention mechanisms in transformers are doing it somehow. I'd rather call them relation mechanisms than attention, because that's what they're really building, many, many, many relations. And we should try to take a look at that. But I don't think we can do it the way we've been working so far. I think we need techniques from neuroscience, possibly also psychology and even social sciences. Sciences that study like an individual example and study systems that are so complex, like the brain, by trying to poke and probe and get information from limited sensors. That's probably what we have to use to understand LLMs. And that work is just beginning.
And I mean, talking about like the understanding of the human brain, how relevant is the human brain going to be in a world where AI really is the dominant force and the smartest element on Earth?
Well, depends on how you define smart and what role we want AI to play. But it's until now and foreseeable future, when we develop AI, we always develop it in service of humans in order to make people more powerful, more creative, more effective. And in that sense, nothing will work other than demonstration unless it helps people to do their job better. And that we can do a lot. We still need humans to set the goals, to set the values, and AI will help us figure out how to get there.
But are you going to have like the Elon Musks, the Steve Jobs of the world? I kind of find it a bit depressing when I think, actually, do you know what? The most creative elements on Earth are not going to come from humans anymore. You know, you're not going to need these people saying, actually, do you know what? Here's the best idea. Let's get to Mars. Or here's the best idea. Let's create the iPhone. You know, in actual fact, it's going to be an AI that's going to be guiding us on what we should be focusing on.
Well, I think AI will play a role, and it will supply some solutions. And the role of humans will change because now you have a much more powerful tool. So your creativity will take on a different nature, dimension, because you can utilize this tool to leverage your creativity. And, you know, Jobs and Musk and everybody else, they understand what humans need and where we could go. And it takes a lot of convincing to get there. You know, we couldn't see iPhone, for instance, coming. We didn't really know how it would change the world. And it did. And now everybody has something like that. And we are still people, and we're still doing what we're doing, but we're doing it more effectively. And I think that that's the role AI will also play. So what we are creating will change. If you're a writer, you use LLMs as a tool. If you're an artist, you use LLMs as a tool. But you're still thinking of what it is that you want to create. You just get different kinds of instructions, you know, and different kind of process that involves AI.
One thing, like with your process thing about AI, you know, one thing I've noticed is you're very entwined with the natural world around us. And again, you've already mentioned like psychology. You know, where does that fit in? Like, you know, where does that come from in terms of, you know, you've given talks before about like hyenas and the roles that they play, right? And, you know, you talk about like, you know, the human brain, right? And what we've really got to focus on more than anything. Where am I going with this? Where I'm really going with this is that, is this going to be something where humans have more purpose in their lives? Is it something whereby, you know, and what I'm seeing more than anything, which is going to sound a bit nuts, is computer scientists that we work with, I'm seeing them become more philosophical about the natural world. I'm seeing them like talk. In fact, one that you've met this morning, who would have said he was a hardcore atheist a few years ago, is now looking at technology, looking at where the world is going and saying, actually, you know, there's a godlike power to this, or there's, you know, to the universe that we're now living in. That was a very poorly worded question, but you get my...
Yeah, I think I understand it. The world view will change. And it allows us to understand or address philosophical questions in a new light. Like we've talked about truth in philosophy for a long time. We talked about moral, ethical choices, but now they become really concrete because we actually have to solve the trolley problem for self-driving cars. They have to do something. And it's a philosophical problem, and there's no right solution necessarily. But people are actually building solutions now because they have to. And same thing with truth. You're asking LLM and something, and you get something out. Is that the truth? Well, the nature of truth is in question because it changes over time. More evidence comes in. It's not as black and white as you might think. There are aspects to it, conditions to it, and just defining what you actually want as output from an LLM forces you to address the question of what is truth and what matters. In some languages, there are multiple words for truth, depending on what you mean by it.
So, I mean, one thing that I'm very concerned about is that in a world of AI, we're going to have computers making all the decisions for us. Like that, and you talk about the truth. I mean, the truth is going to be defined really by whatever data is input into the computer in the first place. Like, what societal changes do you think we're going to see?
Well, I think first of all they will be more informed the decisions that humans make because you get AI to consider many more options and many more contingencies that a human decision maker might. But you still get AI to give you suggestions of what the possible courses of actions are and what the possible outcomes are. And then you use your value system to decide what actually works. I mean, you might ask something simple like, should I take a nap this afternoon? Well, you get some suggestions, but anyway, it's ultimately you who makes a decision based on many other parts of information that your AI might not even have.
So one thing, I'm always too optimistic about things. Jan is always far more realistic. I always think that actually I'm looking at AI, the way the technology is going, and I just think it's going to be able to just do everything for us. And again, because I speak to so many founders, they're always working on these big problems. That doesn't mean they've solved them yet, but in my head, I'm thinking they're going to at some point. But what are the current limitations then in terms of the technology right now? And how limited will AI be, do you think, in 3, 4, 5 years from now?
Well, there always will be limitations. People are always pushing the technology just a little bit beyond where we'll comfortably go. And the solutions that we are developing become part of the society so that we no longer really even think about it, like using a map or driving directions and things like that. And then you're on to the next thing. And that, I think, is important to keep in mind, that the society will keep changing as the tool gets integrated. And our decisions may become more complicated. And there are already, you are now present everywhere in the world. You can have a meeting where participants are from all over the world. And soon, hopefully, we'll also have humans in the moon or in Mars. And we have to juggle other constraints that didn't come up before. So AI is an ingredient for handling all this complexity that will happen because we have more technology and we are evolving with it.
And can we change direction slightly? Can we talk about you? And when did you first get into technology? When was it first a thing for you?
Oh boy, that is so long ago. I don't even remember. I remember one situation where I was a freshman in college and we had a first programming class and struggled with syntax errors, and eventually it worked, and the program asked me to input a number or something like that. And I couldn't believe it. It was like an individual inside the computer that I was talking to, that I created. And that was an aha moment, that we can actually create something intelligence, even if it's limited, that is not us and has a life of its own and world of its own, and we can interact with it. And I've been on that path ever since. Always when new technology, next thing was neural networks. Well, actually, it was more programming.
Sorry, how old are you at this point?
Oh, that was a freshman in college at that point.
Okay, but even earlier, you must have been.
Oh, sure.
When did you get your first computer, or when did you get access to your first computer?
At that point, it was in college. That was actually the first computer. It was 1981, right? Okay. So it wasn't. But the first maybe impression was 2001 Space Odyssey, the movie, HAL. That was a computer that was part of the crew, a mission to Jupiter, I think, and or the moons. And it was solving problems with the crew and also tried to kill them, but that was just a bug that will be fixed, I'm sure, next release. But there was a story behind it. I mean, it was a computer, but the setup was flawed because it was a logical computer that was supposed to solve problems logically, but there was a contradiction, so all hell broke loose. And that's also why I think neural networks are a better solution. They handle contradiction. They handle these uncertain environments and missing data much better than a logical approach. And that was first when we started in grad school and in the 80s and so on. That's what we were solving. We were solving the problem that we saw in logic and rules. And that was the, I told you so moment, because we thought that we were on the right path, that this would be something that would be deployable. And there was a lot of skepticism about it. But like I said, people have been converted now, and they are happy with the way things turned out. But yeah, so that kind of a movie was a great inspiration. Science fiction. I mean, almost everybody that I know was somehow inspired by science fiction. That's what we want to build. I want to build hell, but do it right.
Do you think that's possible?
Yes, absolutely, it's possible. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the limitations, I mean, to be fair, there's not that many.
Well, we don't necessarily see them right now.
Yeah.
We see limitations right now with the current technology, and like I said, truth, hallucinations. That's one limitation.
But you can't jump between galaxies. Like, do you think you'll ever get to a point where you could get to Mars in a day? Right? There must be things that are constrained by science.
Yes. Well, speed of light, kind of difficult to cope with, and similarly computational.
Or the speed of space, right? How quick space is expanding.
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but
physics limitations for sure. But in terms of intelligence, I think that's fascinating because we don't really know. I mean, we have one example, humans, and there could be life on other planets, and based on not even carbon, but other elements. And there's a field of science, astrobiology, that tries to understand what other options are there and how intelligence might be built on those other foundations. And that is why I think it's really important to also study intelligence in computers, because it is another foundation for intelligence. Potentially, we can build intelligent beings that are like us or as intelligent as we are, but based on a different kind of foundation. Right now, we don't really know what LLMs are doing. Are they like brains? Are they like human intelligence, biological intelligence? Or are they based on a different foundation? So that's still something we have to understand. But big question is also the level of, I'm hesitant to use the word consciousness, but that's really what we are talking about. We're talking about the sense of an intelligent being about itself and its relationship with environment, which I think is really essential. Otherwise, it's really just a mechanical machine, but there's something more that gives its value system and its purpose and its goals. And that is one of those questions also, like truth, and that we have to rethink, and ethical decision-making. There's already studies on consciousness on animals, for instance. And everybody who has, a dog believes that there's something there, And similarly, these machines are starting to be aware of their own limitations, their relationships. And we are building something like a machine that has a sense of consciousness. It's not going to be the same as human consciousness. It's not going to be the same as dogs or other animals, but it's going to be something like that. And we have to understand it as well. And that, I think, is a really interesting direction because it broadens our perspective of what intelligence is, what intelligent beings are. And it might also prepare us for perhaps meeting other species in the universe.
As in alien species?
As in alien species.
So do you think that we're going to have some form of symbiotic relationship with AI in terms of implanting a chip in our brain or something?
Yeah.
Is that the way forward for humans?
Oh, absolutely. That's a possibility. And there are already Neuralink, for instance, sure. And people have had cochlear implants for a long time.
What implants?
Cochlear implants, so hearing aids.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that is actually a brain-computer interface. Relatively limited one, but it exists. And baby steps like that are possible. Artificial vision for people who lost it. And that's actually how it's probably going to happen. At first, we are going to repair things that are broken. And they are perhaps sensory, motor elements, because those are easier to repair and see the effects. But then, if you think about it, nothing really prevents us from going beyond that and maybe having something that interacts with your memory. So you might actually have a phone book or whatever it is, some facts that you actually can access. And who knows where we go from there. But it's much more difficult to improve performance, normal performance, than it is to repair something that's lost. So that's where we have to start.
And so if we're implanting, just say hypothetically we were implanting some form of technology into our brain, do humans need to learn, or would they just would humans still need to
Yes.
I mean, the brain being a muscle, right? Like would they still have to learn for themselves, or would it be like, oh, you want to speak Spanish today? Right, we can just upload that.
Plug in a Spanish module.
Plug in a Spanish module.
We are talking about really science fiction now.
Yeah,
I mean, it is pretty far from today.
Yeah. But fine, even if this is let's just for the audience, even if this is 100 years out, I'm curious to understand what you think is physically possible.
Yeah. Well, we see a trajectory. We see cochlear implants. We see other repairs of sensors, motors, limb movements for people who are paralyzed, driving a cursor on a screen. You can see where this is going. And I don't see any conceptual barrier that this is possible, but that isn't. But we don't know, we don't have really a good view of how to actually do it. At first, perhaps these more complex extensions might be something where the human learning is a big part of it. So you're actually using extra capacity, but you're learning to use it. So brain is very plastic, and it could actually take advantage of something and improve, say, concentration or memory capacity or something like that. It might make learning Spanish faster because you have some extra capacity and you learn how to use it. That I could see happening. But it's not really within our vision just yet to plug in something like a Spanish module or something else. But I won't say that it's impossible. We just don't see right now how it could come from where we are.
Going back to consciousness, what do you think consciousness is?
Well, there's a whole area, even neural networks, even from the 80s, who studied consciousness already built models. And one of the theories I liked a lot at the time and still do is this kind of a epiphenomenon where neuronal firings actually synchronize and are coordinated. And this way you can form dynamic structures. And it might be something like that, an actual brain process that allows you to pull out from everything that's going. There's a lot going on in the brain all the time, and you're not always conscious of it or aware of it. And there are competing processes, competing answers, and some of them propagate to the surface, and then you maybe make a response out of those alternatives. So it might be that something is synchronized, and that becomes then your aware representation, a conscious representation. So it could be something like that, a mechanism like synchronization neural firings that constitutes a conscious representation. And we can try to study that. I mean, and people do study that. It's not a slam dunk. We don't really know whether that's happening. Or it could be something else. It could be subthreshold events also in neural firings or neural activation. But we will probably eventually find that, a mechanism that allows us that. But it's also important that it is, again, consciousness is not binary. It's not either or. There are levels of that, and there are different forms of it. And if we understand those forms better, we might be able to also identify it better. And that's why it's also important to look at AI and these models that are starting to respond as if they had some self-awareness, for instance. Because if we find that they do, and they identify how, we might also look at the brain and see if we see something similar in the brain.
How much do we know about the brain at the moment?
Well, we know a lot because we studied for hundreds of years, but really it is still too big a system to completely understand. And there were attempts and still technology that's being developed that would allow us to actually record and understand what's going on in the brain while it's processing. That's the key. We have MRI, fMRI, for instance, that allows us to very coarse picture, EEG, MEG, these different technologies that can allow you to see what the activation is. But it's not yet at the level that people would like to have it, like little maybe nanoprobes that go inside the brain and actually trace the activation as it happens in all the synapses, all the neurons. And we might find something we don't currently see. So it might need new technology before we really get the understanding at that level.
Can I get spiritual for a second? Well, try to. One thing I've always been confused about is like either the science or the God argument. But what I'm seeing at the moment, I think I was trying to say this, I said it poorly earlier, was the more science progresses, the more it makes me realize what's possible. And it makes me think that there's like a higher power. As a scientist, Like, do you take the view that actually, nope, this is just science, or does it make you think, okay, maybe there's a lot more that we don't understand, a godlike or a universal like power that influences?
Well, I guess that's a personal choice. It doesn't really affect your work because you still try to figure things out. And if you believe in this kind of super being, you hope that it's at least benevolent so that you can figure things out. It doesn't hide it or want to hide it. So it's possible for us to make progress in understanding. And that's been the case all along, that we have now better understanding of all kinds of phenomena that were previously attributed to some intelligent being for whatever purpose. And that, I think, is the path that we are on. There's still a lot of discoveries to be made, so we don't have to answer that question in order to do our work. It doesn't really allow us, it doesn't really give you guidance of what we should look at and how. So therefore, it's in a different dimension entirely and a personal choice. I don't think scientists have to attribute anything to God or any other higher power. Or Gaia or something like that. I mean, there could be many philosophies, and philosophies are really fun. It's good to stop and think about bigger picture. But what matters is what actually gives you insight so that you can take the science further. And if whatever, rocks your boat.
For you,
yeah, exactly.
So, and again, so you're 21 years old. You're starting to like really see this technology that no one else is seeing, and you're starting to be like, wow, like we're actually on something here. What was your first job like? And where did you go with that after university?
Well, so if you're a scientist, it's really something that you're passionate about. Sure. I mean, you're passionate about mysteries. You want to figure out how things work, what happened. It could be history too, like figure out what happened in this rock, 30,000 years ago. Why did Neanderthals go extinct? I mean, these questions that you just really want to know because themselves. It's not that you want to get fame or fortune. You're just driven by the mystery. And I think curiosity, and I think that curiosity is driving force for most scientists. And, for me personally, I was after that little interaction with the computer, I want to build better computers, better AI. And then after, getting a degree, then I want to get a next degree and become, you become a little bit more and more narrow. And that's actually something I want to warn against. It's a really good idea to keep an open mind and keep broad interests. Even if it just means every now and then you go to a talk about the origins of the universe or whatever it is, gender differences. So something like that's not in your day-to-day work, life, science, but something that is in a different field but still really interesting. And maintaining these connections with across disciplines is really important for creativity and understanding why do you do what you're doing, and that helps you to be more productive. So as you follow the academic path, you get more and more narrow. There are only few people who can really appreciate what you've done, but technically. But then hopefully you'll also find ways to have an impact and then talk to people and maybe work with other people in other domains, take your technology out and help medicine, help decision-making in science or in politics or whatever it might be.
Was there something that you were was there something you wanted to focus on, or like back then, was there a problem that you wanted to fix for the world?
Well, good question. Well, I wanted to build HAL. I mean, that's always been there. So an intelligent assistant that would help us do better space travel. And there are a couple of times when we had a chance to work with rocket scientists and build better rockets. And that's still ongoing. And every now and then there are opportunities that come up with that. But I think that the biggest project in the last few years was the pandemic and build systems that would allow you to predict what will happen in the pandemic and what you should do about it. What kind of government regulations or community decisions would you like or should you implement so that you mitigate the impact and also economically have less disruption as you could. So that was something that we really were passionate about. It was really difficult to get it to the decision makers. We did in a couple of cases, like Iceland, and their school opening in 21. But now we know how to do that, and we are much better prepared. And we know also how to talk to decision makers better than we did back then. And it was a crisis mode. Everybody made decisions by the seat of their pants. So it was really difficult to get science into decision making. But it demonstrated that we can. And if we take science into decision making, we can make better decisions. And I think that's perhaps the closest to that passion.
And if there is another pandemic, hopefully not, like what do you think we've learned, like in terms of about making decisions to ensure that governments around the world are making better decisions?
Yeah, we've learned a lot, and it wasn't just us. I mean, there's
it was everyone.
Big programs everywhere, and they're still continuing. And international programs, OECD and United Nations, and also governments themselves, and National Science Foundation, and all of those had programs for better decision making in the pandemic, and also all the way from actually predicting where the pandemic might happen and what the pathogen might be, all the way to government responses. So we know a lot. The question is, when that happens, which everybody that I talk to say it will happen, do we remember? Do we pay attention, or do we again go to crisis and panic mode? And that is a really good question. So
we'll go into panic mode again next time.
Well, it's a natural reaction, but there might be better ways of communicating and examples that worked that we can point at. So people don't have to do everything from scratch. They can actually copy something or adapt something that already was done and it worked. So I think there's hope, but there's also a lot of work. And it's not really scientific work as much as it is human work, communication, education, and then being available. And even in a couple of places, like in Austin, actually, there was a great communication between the pandemic scientists and the city government. There were daily briefings that the mayor gave based on the science that was done at UT Austin. Not my group, but Lauren Meyer's group. And that shows that it is possible, actually. And Austin was way ahead of everybody else, all the other cities and around the area. Because they were listening to the science already as it was done.
Right.
And the decisions were made based on scientific predictions.
Yeah, I think, and again, going back to what you were saying earlier about truth, I think that as AI advances, it's getting harder to actually know. In fact, not just AI, but just technology in general. I mean, look at social media. The world's become so noisy, it's almost impossible to know which scientists, what research is accurate.
Yes, that is very, very true. It's very difficult. All the voices, I still believe that it's a good idea to have a lot of voices and a lot of opinions. But we also have to have a mechanism for filtering that and justifications, foundation, the scientific experiments, and be able to identify what is a conspiracy theory that people just believe without any foundation, and something that has been developed to the current scientific knowledge, which also changes and is also imperfect.
Have you got any conspiracy theories that you're particularly fond of?
Oh boy. Well, I really like the idea that aliens had sometime visited the Earth, and part of our success is due to them. But of course, I don't think it's
someone last night. So have you seen the latest updates on the Egyptian pyramids?
I don't really know. I mean, there was Eric von Däniken was one of those when I was growing up that published on these, and they were very entertaining theories. But I still think that we should not take that as a guidance when it's part of human creativity to come up with these theories, and they are entertaining. And still, it's kind of fun to think about that as a hypothesis. What would it look like? What kind of evidence would I try to go and gather in order to prove that? Now, it's really unlikely that if intelligent beings had visited here, they would really care about us, because we'd be so far behind. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's hard not to think that there's some other kind of intelligence in the universe, because it's so vast and just the law of big numbers. And that would be really fascinating to try to make contact with that. We had projects on astrobiology. We tried to develop models of what intelligence would look like if it had different conditions. And that's really interesting work. I wouldn't call that a conspiracy theory, but it is pretty far out there. Like, why do you build models of other kind of intelligences we don't even understand our own? But it is a fascinating topic. What other foundations could there be? What they would look like? How would we talk to them?
And what about time travel? Like, I don't know. Are you familiar with Brian Cox?
Not so, but all the science fiction has a lot of time travel.
Right, and again, I don't know whether it's like like leap, it's like traveling at the speed of light, right? Or some, like button that you press that just teleports you to a different universe. Yeah. But Brian Cox makes like a really interesting argument about saying that actually, like with time travel, it is technically possible to go into the future. You just can't ever come back.
I see.
So,
yeah, it's interesting how the mathematics works, and apparently you cannot completely rule it out mathematically. And there are some ways of making it happen, but again, if it had happened, we probably should see evidence, and we should look at what evidence there would be. So I think it's pretty unlikely. But again, mathematics maybe it's incompletely developed in the sense that we cannot really rule it out, and it will be some point. Or else we could develop a mathematics that actually gives us the tools to do something like this and be really fascinating. So it's not really, again, a conspiracy theory, but if we cannot rule it out, it's interesting to look into it. Yeah, it's inspiring.
Talking about inspiration. So you're born in Finland. You've grown up in Europe. When did you first move to the United States?
I had one summer exchange student experience in Colorado, and then 1 year in Texas, actually, near Austin, as an undergrad, where I took classes in everything that I couldn't do in my home technical university: theater, music,
Really?
Religion,
Did
history.
You play any instruments?
Well, very badly, yeah, but absolutely. And then went to grad school to get a PhD at UCLA. So a couple of times, and I do like the conceptually think that I have both backgrounds, European and American, and that broadens perspective. Also, it's easier to understand what's going on and easier to understand opportunities. They are different. People think differently.
What is the difference in terms of how people think?
Well, there are many differences, of course, and many dimensional differences. And for instance, in entrepreneurship, there's a big difference that in the U.S., in the Valley, Silicon Valley, people are fearless. They try anything. Yeah. And there are people who fund these anything.
Yeah.
And it is much more high risk and potentially high yield. And when you fail, and almost all of those fail, it's considered a positive thing. That failure is something you learn from, and next time you can do better. Next time you do better, and eventually maybe you succeed. And in Europe, people are much more conservative. They are less perhaps willing to take risks. Success is expected. And even just a couple of decades ago, if you fail, it was not good on your career. Now I think that's fortunately changing. But that kind of conservatism is different. And in some cases, it might lead to different kinds of innovation, more safe, more perhaps well-founded, incremental. And U.S., what you create might be rocking the boat, might be illegal. That's how a lot of the innovations come out, because they really want to change how things are done in big sense. And Europe, you work within the system, perhaps. But these are very big generalizations, and there are exceptions. But the general attitude or climate is different.
And Texas, particularly, like all of a sudden we're seeing like huge innovation come out of there.
Yeah, there are. I mean, Silicon Valley is in tech, IT, the biggest, obviously, but there are other hubs too. Austin is one of them. Boston is another one, and there are others.
How long have you lived in Texas for?
Well, I spent a year there, and then from 1990, I've been a professor at University of Texas at Austin. So,
how has it changed over that time then?
A lot. I mean, Austin for sure has grown tremendously. It was 300,000 people. Now it's millions, and high tech has concentrated there a lot. I mean, it was a couple of years ago at least. It was the fastest growing city in the U.S. And grow it means construction and businesses coming in and so on. Part of it is Texas itself is promoting innovation and entrepreneurship and business, and that matters. And there's also a lot of times when we talk about tech innovation hubs, there's an interaction between a university and industry. So University of Texas is one of those powerhouses. Similarly, as in Silicon Valley, there are multiple universities in New York and so on. So it's both the academic innovation, but also the students who actually educate it. And they know what is hot and what is new. And they stay and they take it to the industry.
It's such like a professional maturity that I see with like founders coming out of, again, particularly Austin, Texas. And it's not just in one sector, right? Growing up, you'd say Texas, you would have thought oil.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Energy.
Yeah, well, there's old money in Texas, and Houston is definitely still the center of oil industry, for instance. Austin is much more high tech in that sense. But it then spills over to other areas. I mean, I had a student in my class who wanted to build energy in a different foundation, and that was with kites, that you actually take advantage of wind, and you have a kite that you reel in and roll out, and that will release energy. I mean, it's a wonderful idea. It's a great idea, and I think there are now other companies too that do that. And it's just that ecosystem of innovation is there. Then people think that this guy did it, I can do it too, and I have a different idea. But you have a lot of examples, and that breeds more examples.
How does your brain work? Like, how do you go about this separating the good ideas from the bad ideas?
In entrepreneurship or science?
Well, actually, I was going to say in general. I was going to say, so I obviously meet with a lot of like founders, like thousands. I think over the last 8-9 years, it's at least 18,000. Right? All from Emma, by the way. And everyone has like a big idea. And one thing that I do, I separate it like I focus more on the commercial viability. I love a big idea, right? I'm a bit of a dreamer myself, so even if the technology doesn't exist yet, I'm like, do you know what? It will exist in 1 year, 2 years from now. Yeah. And then I look at the commercial viability. And if the commercial viability isn't there, I just think, forget it. But that's really how I measure whether an idea is good or not. And I can always be wrong.
Yeah.
From your perspective, like how does your mind think about these things? How do you say, actually, with a kite idea, what was it you saw? Actually, this is something that could really work.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's very, very hard. And there are examples where I've told some of my best students that, I don't think that's going to work. And they go out there and they do it anyway and come back at, oops, it did work. And it was a great idea. And for 30 years, we've been building on that idea. And it is understanding an idea and its value, it's a little difficult to communicate to another person. So like the student had a lot more perspective, had a lot of time to think about it, communicating to a professor or VC or something. You only have a few minutes. So it is difficult to give all that background. It's not necessarily even all that clear because there are multiple factors that come into play. So you can try to actually evaluate the intrinsic value of the idea. And when I like something, it's because there's a surprise. There's something that's like, that makes sense. I never thought of it. That is interesting. That's something that has value, that you recognize something good and that you missed. That's a big part of it. But also the person who's promoting it. I mean, have they thought about it for a while? Do they make connections with other fields? And can they anticipate where it's going in beyond the first couple of challenges? It's a little different in science and in business because in science you really just have to have the idea that works, that actually can be demonstrated in an experiment, and that contributes value already because other people can build on it. And it varies from discipline to discipline. There's a joke about hiring faculty in different areas and how much money you have to give them when they come to be effective. And then there are some more expensive ones, like you're doing quantum computing. You need a quantum computer, lots of money. If you're a mathematician, you need pencil, paper, and a trash can. And if you're a philosopher, you need pencil and paper.
Like that, very good. Very,
so
very good.
So it varies, and but still in philosophy, again, and science too, to some degree, ideas have values even if they are not commercially viable. And even if, an example, logic. Met a guy who did a dissertation on some very abstract form of logic that years after we found in that space that he defined, there were no elements at all. But he built beautiful mathematics on top of that. And other people have used that mathematics to do other things. Even though he was talking about a space that doesn't even exist.
Sure.
So there are different dimensions of value. One of them is commercial viability. But even a person might build something that doesn't quite have commercial viability, but somebody else will pick it up and build something else. Pivot,
Sure.
Yeah.
Which actually, sorry, because I'm going to contradict myself now. America, particularly, like they do have that entrepreneurial spirit, and they will invest in things that don't have commercial viability yet, and they'll be prepared to wait 5, 10, 20 years to get a return on their money, right?
It's difficult to get VC money with a perspective that long. But
now it is. Now it is actually, yeah. But like
I think it's always been you want to get return on investment in a couple of years, but what's important then is to have a couple of steps. So you can build something that's viable in a short term, but has also bigger implications in longer term. And those are even harder to recognize, yeah.
Do you ever think, actually, do you know what? I'm doing all this work. I understand the technology better than pretty much anyone else out there. Do you ever think, actually, sod it, I'm just going to go and build my own company?
Yes, of course.
Or do you work with like early stage companies as well?
Yeah, and then I did found a company with just 3 people, for a while, and it was pretty much like that. We had technology developed in a university, and we were shopping it around and went to different places to say, okay, we can solve your problem with this technology. It was neuroevolution, which has been my field for decades. And we go to a company, insurance company, we go to a security company, we go to different places where we can actually find that if you had this kind of machine learning system that comes up with decision strategies, you can do better. And we made a compelling case, and it was really difficult. So at one point we just decided start a company and build this technology, build a platform. And then that's something that we can much more easily sell. And that worked out. We did a demo and eventually actually were acquired by a bigger startup, which was then acquired by an even bigger company. I mean, that's how things work. So that's one way to get there. I mean, it's difficult to get a startup all the way from beginning to, say, an IPO, but there are other paths, and this was one of those. You get acquired, and eventually the technology still exists, actually, what we did, and it's part of a much, much bigger company and project.
Yeah, and I'm actually seeing like a lot of like founders now, like when I speak to them, they don't talk about IPO. They're like, we're going to scale to this size, we're going to get to $100 million valuation, and then we're going to sell, which I've not seen before.
Yeah. Yes, and there's also some interesting studies about potential outcomes. Like, for instance, if you have the technologist, the faculty, who is the CEO of a company, it might be less likely to be successful than something where the CEO is brought from outside and understands the business, because the developer of the technology will try to make that technology work no matter what. But the CEO will see, well, we actually have to pivot and do something a little different, and that might be more viable. So it's a different kind of a environment and challenge than academics are used to. So the idea is only a starting point, and there's another whole world on making something business viable.
And I think that's one thing that Jan and I got right early on. I said to him, like, I think the first time we ever met, I said, everyone's going to chase the best technology. Everyone. We're not. Right, because we're not going to win there. We're going to build decent technology for now, and we're going to wait for the world to catch up to where we want it to be. But what we're going to do is we're going to build out the community, and we're going to have this like super niche community, and we're just going to go after those that are going to just like the people that are going to go off and build companies in the future that are going to be valued at $1 billion. Am I allowed to say actually how you described? I loved it how you described Rayon before when we were first talking outside about Y Combinator for adults. So I loved that. I was like, that's and that's nothing against Y Combinator.
Yeah, but notice also that this is what we talked about, the American and European philosophy, that Y Combinator is really young kids, fresh off college, who have a chance to prove themselves to VCs. And they're all over the place. And then Y Combinator for adults are more later stage. They already have experience and they already have a lot of these things figured out. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier.
So we tried it. Like when we first started, like we would speak to like a lot of founders that had actually been through Y Combinator, and they were so. This was my mistake. I often confuse a person's potential for their character, and the outcome of that was that when we first started this, I would say to Jan, "Wow, Jan, I've met this amazing founder. They're going to build a multi-billion-dollar company. They've just been through YC, and then 2 years later, they just like throw in the towel. And it could be because of anything. It could be they had a fight with their girlfriend, right, or something, or they've been irresponsible with how they invested the money, or sorry, spent the money on building the company. And I just found that actually we just need to like cut past that. Just forget those guys. Let's go to like the Nvidias, the Palantirs, the Teslas. Let's just make friends with the people there. And at some point, they'll leave, or that's what the philosophy was. They'll leave, and we'll be there to them. We'll be there to help them.
Yeah. But there's a big role for companies like Rayon and Y Combinator too, to bring people together, because being successful in a startup requires so many different roles, so many different skills. Usually one person does not have them all. I mean, I know from academia, a lot of times I teach a class, it's a research class, and there's somebody who's very vocal and very entertaining and personality is really, really great, but the person who comes up with the best ideas, sometimes the guy in the back who never said a word during the class, and the term report is just really groundbreaking technology. That's one thing. And then you do need the communicators. You need to communicate to outside world, to investors, to customers. You need those people. And actually, following up on that earlier comment, research at Stanford, Rita Cudlove in particular, studied even SBIRs, the Small Business Innovation Rewards or something from NSF. The idea is that you fund academics who have good ideas to start companies. And it turns out that it actually is difficult to make that work. And companies who don't go that route, but instead have VC money, do better. Why? Because the VCs bring their own people. They bring the professional CEOs, the CFOs, they bring the contacts, they bring everything else than the founder who actually has the technology. So in order to be successful, you need a team. And companies like Rayon can play that role. Really, bring in people that fit together and together can work to make it successful.
And Jan's the brains, right? Like the reality is that I'll come up with an idea, like we should do this, or let's change in this direction, and that's the easy bit, But Jan's the one that actually has to sit there and work out how we do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not even that good a communicator, so he deserves tons of credit for like what we've done, and I think like the network that we have, or sorry, I shouldn't say network, the community that we have, it's extensive. Because we've been able to like execute all different stages, create values, and always create new value propositions, I should say, for the founders and also for the companies that we work with, And now everyone says to us, like, we just want access to the best people. We want to invest in them. We want acquisition targets. We want to make sure they're using our products, and it's a very exciting time. But you're right. Like, I think a lot of the time, if you don't mind me saying, the academics get overlooked.
Well, they need a lot of help.
Sure. Because they don't communicate as well a lot of the time.
They're in a different space. Like I said very early on, that the intrinsic value of solving a mystery is what drives them. They are not often, well, some of them may be driven by fame and fortune, but mostly they are driven by solving mysteries and the intrinsic value of that. And in order to take something to the real world, you need help. You can't really be an expert in all those very different aspects. But fortunately, there are others who can then work with them. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I'm very lucky. I get to speak to some amazing people. And the reality is that I only understand about 2.5% of what they're actually saying. But, I also get to meet the business people that they're also working with who are able to really communicate like their visions. And I think like with regards to the potential, you've got to have someone that you like really can like look up to. You've got to have somebody that can, like you were saying, it's a team, and mentors. Like, I've never had a mentor, for instance, but have you ever had figures or people that have mentored you, or
Yeah, yeah.
people that you really take?
Oh, it's very, very
Yeah.
important. And they can be in different aspects of your career too. Political mentors and scientific mentors, and it's really important to listen to them. Sometimes, like in academia, you actually now get assigned somebody who is a more senior person and has been through the same kind of career choices and can help you out. But it also happens grassroots, that you meet people who you get along with and they maybe see the potential and they want to help you out. I mean, people always love to give advice. It is just fun, and it is nice to give advice to somebody. Like, if and it works with students and professors. My student is more successful than I am. Great. It's like your kid, right? I mean, you want your kids to be successful. So that is very natural in academia, and also I believe in a startup world too. But you still have to look for those people and build those relationships and cultivate them. But it's not anything too difficult or challenging or unpleasant. So it happens naturally, but take advantage of that. And
So
be really good.
who was the biggest influence in your career?
Many, but neural network researchers, Jay McClellan, Jeff Hinton, they were there in the 80s when I first wrote my paper and published it, and I got feedback from them, and I was very grateful about that. Academically, then in our department, there were senior Ben Kuipers, one of those. I can name a number of them. All have different roles, and I'm very grateful for that.
And what's the advice then? The main advice that you give your students?
Main advice. Well, it depends. Again, it's very personal, and that's why you have to spend time to get to know them. But sometimes it is to be more persistent instead of resisting the lure of all the new things that happen. Because there's so many things that you could be doing, and you work on something for a little bit, and something else pops up, and you never really follow through. You got to be persistent. Sometimes it is that you worked on it for 2 years, and it's not going to go. Let's try something else. It's also very hard to give up on something when you're already invested in. So it's the opposite advice. And sometimes it is to go out and, like I said earlier, be curious about other fields. Go to a psychology talk. Go to a neuroscience talk. Go to
Do you
listen.
still do that? Do you have time to do that?
Well, now it's actually much easier than it used to be because everything is online.
Right.
So yes, and there's so many different sources now that you can. I follow maybe a dozen different news groups or digests where these are announced, and I often go, and sometimes they are United Nations, sometimes they are in our department, sometimes they are at Stanford, there are other places. I try to find those that are interesting, and not only that, there are podcasts, there are recordings, so it's almost too much that you have to somehow learn to filter it, but now it's much, much easier than it used to be, and I think it's really wonderful, and it breeds creativity.
And with regards to creativity, right? We're obviously seeing people invent solutions. Like you were saying earlier, the LLMs really are the commodity. Some of the solutions are good, some of them are bad. What's the ethical component? Like, how do you go about deciding, what we should be building versus what we shouldn't be building? Yeah. And what are the ethical questions you ask yourself when you see, some of the solutions your students come to you with?
Yeah, it is hard, and it's important. I mean, you can make decisions about, whether you build an application that kills people or like really has immediate implications, better weapons or something. But even Stuart Russell in his video about AI weapons pointed out that there are AI applications in defense that are really important. But I mean, I really wouldn't want to work on things that are so clearly not great to society necessarily. But what's really hard is to look like a couple of steps beyond that, like what people can use this technology for that's evil or harmful to society. And that is very difficult to estimate. And people are very creative in that, and they can become better fraudsters, better spammers,
One fell for one recently.
Yeah.
And
They're so good now.
I,
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. So I was actually on a call like with the bank, and I was like, okay, cool, thank you very much, done. And then I got a phone call like a minute later from the bank saying we're calling you back, and and they started asking me questions. I started giving them information. I was like, wait a minute, they've just called me, and I've got a rule: if someone calls me, I just don't give them the information. Doesn't matter what. And they gave me this information, and I went through it, and like, I phoned my accountant, and I was like, look, I've just had a call from the bank. This is what they're saying to me. They were like, it's a scam. And I was like, is that a coincidence, or were they listening to my conversation with the bank, and then someone else has phoned me up like a minute later? And just it was almost like a continuity to the conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if they had technology to actually track your calls, or maybe it was a lucky break, but they are getting very good. And one of the most scary ones is that they can fake somebody's voice that that can call you and plead for money or something like that.
My dad almost fell for
and
it. Actually, no.
Yeah, this is the kind of people will always be creative, and they will use it for harmful ways as well. The best philosophy I can think of is to keep the technology open, because it's not, yes, people can use it for bad, but also we can develop defenses. When the technology is open, there will be more advances in science, but there will also be always a cat and mouse game. But at least we know what tools are being used, and we can develop those defenses. And there's lots of desire in the high-tech community to do good. I mean, AI for good is a big thing. People want to use it for good, and if we make it open, I believe that the good will outweigh the bad. But we do have to be alert and aware and build those defenses.
Do you know what Leonardo AI is?
Leonardo AI, I've heard about it.
So it makes like graphics online. You can make like clips like using like AI, and you prompt the AI agent, and it will make almost like a storyboard for you. And one of the guys, we were testing it. They were like, look, rather than have to record your voice and go over it, why don't we use AI? We'll use Grok, get it to write like the script for us. We just record your voice for like a minute, and then we can just create as many videos as we want. And at first, I was like resistant to it, and then within 6 months to a year, I was seeing how good the technology had got, and I was like, "Go on, let's just do it. We needed to do it." It's insane. I recorded my voice for like 60 seconds, and then all of a sudden, it's almost got I'd say within like 75-85% accuracy.
I'm always the glass is half full. But imagine doing that for somebody like your grandfather who's passed away, but you have a couple of recordings. Now you can do that same for your grandfather, and you can also have AI read about his background and maybe writings that he's done, and you can create an avatar. You can have a conversation with your grandfather, and it may feel very real, and that can be quite interesting and important and connect with the past. I mean, that's just amazing what we could do with that. And that is, I think, for the good. You can, of course, make fakes of Obama or whatever they have done. But I think that, the benefits outweigh the dangers. And I think we have to be aware and we have to be alert. But there's so much that can be done that's very useful. So,
well, can we talk, as a glass half full person, like, can we talk about the opportunities that we're seeing? We're seeing huge changes in the United States right now. It does feel like that this AI revolution, I've said this time and time again, it feels like it is very much like an American revolution, an American-dominated revolution. What's the opportunity specifically? And it's probably quite good to ask you actually, because you're not originally from America. So like, what's your take on what's going on with America? Like, is it like just is it like the Industrial Revolution times 10?
Well, it does feel like Industrial Revolution. I mean, I wasn't there in Industrial Revolution, but I've read about it, that there's a thorough change in society, and people are doing studies on it. Like, most jobs will be affected, but also very small number of people are left without jobs. They have to restructure and relearn skills, and there's all kinds of initiatives to retrain people. And actually, this AI is not that impossible to retrain people to do. So I think we have a good chance of making a relatively smooth transition. It's not going to be smooth, but at least more beneficial and less people hurt in this transition. Now, but we're talking about America, but we look at, say, my team at Cognizant, for instance. We have, I don't know, 25 people, and they grew up in 20 different countries or something. I mean, the tech is still a melting pot, completely a melting pot. They come from all over.
But it's in America, though. It's a melting pot.
It is true, it's in America, but also now that we have remote folks, we have people who are in Europe. We have people who are in China, and they are part of our team too. And with these many times a week video calls, they feel like part of the team. And when they actually meet them in person, you already know them. I mean, totally know them. So that part is there too. And it's also, there's no reason why we could not have, why it would have to be in only Silicon Valley. I mean, it could be. And so DeepSeek came from China too. And it is the same community. I mean, as much as we know that China is politically very totalitarian and isolated in some sense, the academics, the scientists, they are totally part of the community, have been. They go to the same conferences. It's kind of hard when a conference in the US and you don't get visas. So conferences are now in Canada. And everybody goes there, and we meet in Canada because it's easier for people to come from all around the world, especially from China. And so we have lots of discussions with the Chinese. They are part of the same community, and that's no accident that DeepSeek came from China because of that. And same can be true of Europe as well. They are part of the same community. What's been a little different is really all this money that has been available to build LLMs. That's the wrinkle. That if you have to spend 100 million, maybe now it's 500 million, we don't even know, to build these competitive LLMs. It doesn't happen that easily. And there's been money in Silicon Valley, and the Chinese have been able to also allocate that. It's a lot harder to do. But maybe that will go away. I mean, the technology develops. DeepSeek is already using smaller models. It's technology that didn't have to be built because we could scale up. But now maybe we can build smaller models that are as good because we can, improve the technology.
For like a non-technical person, why did the world get so excited about DeepSeek?
Yeah. Precisely because people think that the origin of these technological innovations comes from Silicon Valley. And it has for decades. And now this is somewhere completely different. Sure. Not even in the US, not Europe, but China, which hasn't been, I was in this program, IEEE Distinguished Lecturer Program, which was really to send people all around the world to talk about cutting edge technology, to try to make them aware and, encourage them to build their own. And I went to Colombia and India and Iceland also and China. And that was 2017. And I was there in the lab, several labs, and people were hard at work, and they introduced what they were doing, and they said that we are trying to replicate what's happening elsewhere in academia and in industry in the Valley. And maybe in a couple of years, we could be leading it. And this is now happening. I mean, it was really focused effort, catch up, and then continue and start leading. And that has happened. They have tremendous resources, tremendous people, and funding too. So it is really not an accident. People who are in this community and have been talking to them for a long time, it wasn't surprising. I mean, it was something that they are smart people, they have resources, they are part of the community. They could have developed something, and they did. So what, like Jan LeCun pointed out, what was, I think, more remarkable, if you're in the community, was that it was an open source innovation, like Llama and Meta and Jan LeCun, that advocates open source. DeepSeek makes their models available. And that was, even to me, it was surprising that something from China would actually be open that way. But this is what made AI happen. It was all this open interaction. And it didn't have to be that way. And it hasn't always been that way. But people in the Valley, when they started working on deep learning in the 2010s or so, they always published papers. They put source code on the web. And anybody who was in the field could take that and build something new. And it just accelerated the development of the technology. That you see a paper in Archive came up. So everything is published in Archive. You see something in Archive, there's a pointer to the code, GitHub repo. You can take that, you can start building on it, and in a couple of months you have the follow-up paper. So it went from having a paper that follows something up 2 years later. It's 3 months now. you know, and you can immediately build on what other people have done, and that accelerated the progress. And DeepSeek is part of that community, and I'm really glad to see that happen. So it was open source, demonstrating its value over closed source.
And I guess, you know what, like when we talk about the future of like China versus America, if the technology is open source, it doesn't really matter where it's coming from.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, and I've seen that. I was giving a talk in Mozambique once, Maputo, University of Maputo. And
when was that?
Oh, that was in the 90s. I mean, it was a long time ago already, right after, I think, the Civil War ended, so we could go there. And they had no access to textbooks, for instance. But internet was already there, and they could access papers off the internet. And they could actually catch up. And that was just wonderful that you could. And now, of course, GitHub is open to everybody. It's not just Chinese who can actually do it. The people in Maputo can actually take that and build something. And there are a couple of examples of that happening. Of course, it's still hard because other things are missing. But that's the whole idea, that all of a sudden the whole world has the human capital, the brain capital that can build on it.
And I think that's one thing that like we got right. I didn't use the word LLMs like 8-9 years ago, right? I wasn't thinking that way. But I would talk about like the taxonomy. I'd be like, once you've worked out the taxonomy, once we've worked out the language, you know, you could be a 10-year-old in Nicaragua or a 10-year-old in, you know, the upper side of Manhattan. It doesn't matter. You're going to have access to the same opportunities. It's really like, and I don't like to sound like to romanticize things, but it's the democratization of like education and opportunity.
Yes, absolutely is. And there are powerful consequences of that. But there are also downsides, like you pointed out. Anybody can have a voice, and it can be a conspiracy theory. So it's much harder for the 10-year-old in Nicaragua or wherever to decide what is actually worth following. So we still have to build some tools like that people can use to understand what's actually worthwhile. It can be done, but it takes a lot more critical thinking.
Do you know what worries me? Like the thing is, like with social media, that's not even a machine learning element, and yet there's so much like manipulation.
Yes,
you know, you can just be sitting at home, and you're all of a sudden you're like posting conspiracy theories and stuff. Or, you know, bad mouthing someone, and there's no truth to it. There's no research. There's no evidence.
Yes,
and all of a sudden you're just like spreading like lies.
Yeah, and in this new social media world, likes and followers is the currency, and you get high likes and followers if you are outrageous and you promote something that's not true at all. So it's pushing it in the wrong direction. So some things have gotten easier for us, like navigation in iPhone, and we can always be in connection with people we want to talk to. But this has become the real challenge of this age, is to be filtering out things that don't matter and understand what matters. So critical thinking is one thing that we really should teach in schools, starting from middle school at least, and get people to understand that there's just all these voices, and a lot of it is just entertainment. And there are some jewels there that you can follow, and you should. You cannot build a better engine or rocket by following conspiracy theorists. I mean, you actually have to follow technology and science and solid foundations.
How much time do you spend on your phone?
On my phone?
Like, would you ever sit there on X?
Oh no! I don't even have an X account. Right, I have LinkedIn account, but I don't have.
Yeah. Well, LinkedIn's a lot safer. Like LinkedIn, you can't sit there and scroll for like 20 minutes. So I say 20 minutes because that's probably what I would do. But kids are sitting there scrolling for hours, and they're thinking, what can I do just to get the next like hit, right?
Yeah, and the applications are designed to do that. They're designed to get you hooked, and there's entertainment value, and there's value in maintaining relationships. But again, you have to be so well on top of it and in control of it. And that's hard, especially for kids to do. So we need, to educate them and train them, and especially the critical thinking, but this is also just the judgment part of it.
Are you optimistic about the world?
Of course.
Optimistic about the future for the world.
Yeah, of course. But also there are serious dangers, but you can't live your life not being optimistic. I mean, and you can, lead by example, but you also can try to point people the right direction. And and you try to spread a positive message. And I think that's much more important. It would be so easy now to listen to all the doomsayers, and they are compelling, and they are not all wrong, and then not do anything and go live in the mountains and hide. But I think we really need people who are leaders, who are positive and take all this technology a positive direction. And there's role for everybody in that.
Yeah, like that's what I think. And like again, like with Gibraltar, the reason I'm here going, small population, bring very advanced technology here. You could retrain the whole country probably in about 2 years, less, and you could lead. Which I think that's it. I'm overly optimistic, which is not always a good thing, right? I think I think if it's physically possible to achieve, then it can be achieved, which annoys Jan or more than anything. But I think that where we are now, I think we could just be rebuilding the future of the middle classes. And I think that, when you think about like advanced civilizations, like when you talk about like a space odyssey, right? That's not someone jumping in their car and going to work, driving to work to be an accountant. All of a sudden, like when you think about future alien civilizations, they are advanced, right? And I think that AI is going to be possibly the opportunity for us to create that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think of like the very early motivation that you asked me about HAL and all that, I'm thinking of, we will expand beyond the Earth. We will establish something in Mars. We will spread. And we need all this middle class to spread out and do that. And then there's really no limit. We can grow. And we need all these tools. And AI is going to be a big part of it.
I'm going to ask you one last question. Would you go to Mars?
Oh, absolutely. But I would like to come back too. I wouldn't be one of those who bought the ticket one way to Mars, which were sold in thousands, I think.
I've spoken to someone, a young girl, she's like very well known in the United States. She's training to go to Mars. And I spoke to her father. And I was like, how do you feel about that? And he was like, as a father, everything in space wants to kill you. but you want to support your kids and understand.
But see, this is what made humans what they are. I mean, it's not just us. I mean, imagine Polynesians. They don't see anything beyond the horizon, but they, probably go, I wonder what's over there if I go over there. And even look closer to home, what's on the other side of those mountains? There are always people who want to look on the other side. They might get killed, but they still go.
Okay, so June 2011, I was with a Maasai tribe in Kenya. And I was talking to one of the chief sons of the tribe. And he was like about early 20s. I think he had like 18 wives or something. And I said to him, like, I was talking, like, first of all, their English was very good, right? Which I thought was amazing. And, you meet the young kids in the schools, they're already speaking like 2-3 languages by the time they're 6-7 years old. And I actually said to him, are you not interested, like, looking into the distance, what's beyond those mountains? And his answer was amazing. He goes, I've been to the top. I thought, brilliant. That's it, I've been to the top. And we're so stuck in terms of like what our perception is of the universe. And I think AI is just going to open it up for all of us, whether we like it or not.
Yep.
Risto, it's been really great having you with us today. I'm really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much for your time. And we're going to do this again. And I hope you enjoyed Gibraltar.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.